Are the feds, though, intervening too early and too often in labor disputes? Is the government undercutting labor unions in order to protect the economy? Let's go on the money to find out more. Joining me in Winnipeg, Ian Lee, assistant professor at the Sprott School of Business, and in Toronto, Erin Weir is the economist with the United Steelworkers. Thanks, both of you, for being here.
Pleasure.
Ian, is she right, Lisa Raitt, to say you got to protect the economy, therefore you got to intervene before the strike is 12 hours old?
Well, indeed. I did research on this, looking at all the times that past governments and parliaments have intervened to send workers back to work. From 1950 until now, under every government, starting with Louis Saint Laurent, Diefenbaker, Pearson, Trudeau, etc., they legislated 35 times, by the way, railroads 8 times out of the 35, back to work. And the reason why, and you mentioned it in the beginning, it's because of this $500 million a week. The unions, and Mr. Mulcair will know what this is. This is what they call externalities. They were talking about the externalities about the oil sands, which are very far down the road and they're very indeterminate. Whereas these externalities imposed by the strike on innocent people across Canada in mining communities, resource communities, the agriculture communities, are being shut down because of these immediate and pressing externalities that the unions and Mr. Mulcair want to eliminate in the oil sands, yet they disappear for the tall grass when the externalities become very manifest and visible with a strike and imposing all these costs on Western Canada.
Erin Weir, is this undercutting the right to strike? Or is it?
Well, I think it is. I mean, I would point out that Canadian Pacific is not the only railroad in Canada. It's certainly not the only mode of transportation. Ian talks about resource communities, and it's true the main thing that would have been affected by this strike are shipments of bulk commodities, which tend to be pretty fungible and tend to already be stockpiled in various locations. So I don't really see how you can argue that a few days of a strike at CP would constitute some kind of economic crisis or justification for taking away people's right to strike.
Well, it's
and
because
this Conservative government
down.
has... I'm sorry?
It's because these businesses and communities themselves have said, look, you're putting great damage. You're costing us great damage. It's not the government's just responding to the demands, as have past Liberal and Conservative governments, whenever there's a strike.
Going back to that history of past Liberal and Conservative governments, you mentioned 35 times with back-to-work legislation, that was over many decades. I guess what I would point out is with just 1 year of this current Conservative majority, we've had 5 instances of these heavy-handed interventions. So basically, any time there's been a strike or a lockout at a major federally regulated workplace, the Harper government has brought down the hammer, and I think that is a bit excessive.
Aaron, one issue here, which is CP made over $500 million in profit. Now they want, the management there says, hey, we got to get more money out of this, and we're going to go after the pensions of the workers. The workers said, hey, we're going to strike over that. But does management say, I mean, they're already profitable. One way to end this, by the way, would be to not go after the pensions of the workers and just take, shareholders would have to take less profit.
But Evan,
what's wrong with that? So does the government count on the heavy-handed government to come in and basically help them?
But to answer your question very directly, they're not being legislated back to work to benefit the management of CP. They're being legislated back to work to benefit all the small towns in northern Ontario and in Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Alberta and BC whose livelihoods depend on being able to ship the product out to the coast to send over to Asia. So this is not about helping CP, or the airline for that matter. The airlines didn't want to be legislated back. CP probably doesn't. It's the communities and representing millions of Canadians whose lives are being massively disrupted by this strike.
Aaron,
but Ian, as you say, this is part of a pattern, and I think the problem with the pattern is it sets a precedent, and it creates a situation where employers know that if there ends up being a labor dispute, the Harper government is going to step in and with legislation to resolve it in their favor. So of course CP is demanding all these pension concessions. They've got nothing to lose. They know if they don't get a deal, the Conservatives are just going to help them out here, and that's the bad thing. I would actually go back to a study the C.D. Howe Institute, which is hardly a left-wing or pro-union organization, did a couple of years ago, showing that these interventions, this back-to-work legislation, actually reduces the likelihood of a freely negotiated settlement in future rounds of bargaining.
All right, guys, I got to
very
leave it
quickly,
there.
though, you'll like my proposal then that they become clean with Parliament and say, look, you don't have the right to strike in transportation communications. Amend the Labour Act, remove the right to strike, and set up an alternative dispute mechanism because you can't go to strike.
That would be a huge overreach.
All right, yeah. So some might wonder if there's constitutionality issues in that, but that may be something that comes in. Ian Lee, Erin Weir, unfortunately, I got to cut it short today, but great to have both of you on. Good discussion. We'll talk more about this, see how this thing resolves.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Coming up.